Hi, this is Dr. Jarrod Spencer, sports psychologist, and welcome to the Mind of the Athlete Mental Endurance CD program. This program consists of over 25 nuggets of information that I found to be the most helpful in taking athletes to higher levels of performance. May the contents of this program help you to excel in athletics and beyond. Let's get started. We know not the hour nor the day, but we know that every athlete's career is going to have to end at some point in time. And we call this in sports psychology the athlete in transition, going from the end of your career to moving beyond sports into the larger world. And that can be a very easy transition for some people and a very difficult transition for others. You might be surprised to know that whether you end on a high note or a low note in sports doesn't always directly relate to how well you're going to transition beyond. You see, it's a psychological phenomenon when you've invested so much of your time and energy, and especially your identity has become wrapped up in sports. When it ends and you shift into the world beyond, that changes your whole self-concept. That begins to change the way that you view life. That begins to change the way that you even worked out and exercise and on all the feel-good drugs and chemicals in your bodies that get released from intense training and working out. It changes the way people talk to you. What do you focus on? What do you do now? If you're an athlete in transition, I encourage you to find an athlete who's gone through that as well. Be mentored by that person. Ask them, how did they do it? What was it like for them when sports ended, either abruptly or you saw it coming because it was the end of your college career, end of your high school career, end of your pro career, and you knew it was time to retire. I often encourage you to use that word to retire. No matter how your athletic career ended, it's not that you quit, it's that you retired, that it was time to move on. It's time to enter the athlete in transition phase. But if you're in that phase, pay attention to the psychological components of it. If you do this, the transition can be smoother, healthier, and you can look fondly back upon your athletic career without regrets, without remorse. And you can more successfully translate all the skills and ability you learned in sports into the next venture you would go for in life. Have an attitude of gratitude. When I work with high performers, the key mindset that I see again and again is that no matter what is happening, they have an attitude of gratitude, that they are so grateful for the opportunities that they have in front of them. I can think of one former heavyweight champion who shared with me that no matter what he was doing, when he was training, he would just say to himself, man, I'm so thankful that I've got 2 legs to run. Man, I'm so thankful that I got a chance at the heavyweight title. Man, I'm so thankful that I have the opportunity to do this for a living. And so no matter how great the pain is, like that champion, an attitude of gratitude can help propel you through those tough moments of your training. An attitude of gratitude can help you endure all the negative aspects that come along with sports and the not so good aspects of it. When you have an attitude of gratitude, you will compete with joy in your heart. And when you're competing with joy in your heart and those other positive emotions, you will generally have more energy. You will rebound faster through adversity, and you will be more resilient. Those positive emotions are incredible fuel, and it starts with an attitude of gratitude. Ravi Zacharias, a Christian apologist, said one of the most powerful quotes that I think relates to sports. He said this, he said, the saddest day in a person's life is the morning when they wake up after they achieved which they thought would bring them the ultimate, and instead they still feel empty inside. They still feel empty. They realize that things really haven't changed. I don't want you to step in this trap to think that it's all about you winning some championship and when you're the Super Bowl champion or when you get that college scholarship or when you're the starter on the team that suddenly everything's going to fall into place and people are going to treat you differently and everything's going to just work out. Because the sad reality in sports is it's simply not true. And if you talk to athletes that have gone ahead of you and reached the top of the mountain, sure, they may tell you that the view that they see up there is really nice, but it doesn't change who you really are. And so don't put all of your hopes and dreams in sports and that everything's going to be great when you achieve that thing which you think is going to bring you the ultimate. Because you're going to be so sad and disappointed when you wake up and you realize that, yeah, it was pretty cool, but your parents still treat you the same way, and your brothers and sisters are still doing the same thing. And then eventually, like anything else in sports, one day you're the headlines and the next day you're in the trash can. So nobody really cares about yesterday's news. And so you've got to begin to cultivate a very deeper meaning, a deeper purpose in your life that's beyond sports, something more satisfying, filling that void inside of you with things. I'm often talking about spiritual things in this regard. Don't fall into the trap of thinking that sports is going to bring you the ultimate. Otherwise, you'd be set up for a really great fall. Athletes tend to get better grades in season than out of season. Why is that? I actually believe that athletes get better grades in season than out of season because they are more disciplined. Their life is more structured. I know you're so busy during the in season and you feel like there's not much room. But what often gets cut out is some of the social life. And what you end up doing is really focusing a lot better on managing your time, managing your energy. But more specifically, I think athletes get better grades in season because of this. When you're training as an athlete, maybe you're training to hit that baseball or hit that jump shot. Every day, you're in a very high brainwave state. You are training your brain to have incredible focus. And that ability to excel in sports with great focus translates the next day when you're in the classroom. And so when the teacher is teaching you, somehow, some way, you are able to dial in and really absorb the information because you are in a constant state of greater focus. But when you're out of season and you aren't taking the batting practice or you're not taking those jump shots nearly as often, then your mind doesn't have to reach that state of hyper-focus anymore. And in fact, then you oftentimes have more free time, more leisure time. And there's nothing wrong with that. But one thing that tends to happen then is that we say, well, I could get to those homework assignments later, or I'll do that over this weekend. But really, because we don't have that structure, that time management like we did in season, we simply don't get it done. And so maybe the A's turn to A minuses or the B's turn to B minuses. Whatever it may be for you, know as an athlete, you'll tend to have better grades in season than out of season. Clearer mind, better performance. Clearer mind, better performance. The clearer your mind is, your body knows what it wants to do in sports. Your mind knows what it wants to do in sports. And you can do amazing things. You know this to be true. Unfortunately, the X factor is how flooded is your mind with all that trauma and all that drama, all that negative junk. And so the clearer your preconscious mind is, the easier it is for you to relax, the less emotional energy it takes to block out that stuff. But if you're dealing with a breakup of a girlfriend or a boyfriend, or you've done some of the wrong things out there in your training, in the moment of truth, you can't fake that. You can't hide that stuff. And your mind has to work harder to block that out. And so as best you can, keep your preconscious mind clear. How do we do that? Talking about those things is a major way, one of the most significant ways to keep that preconscious mind clear. Another great way, avoid the negative junk around you. Stick to the path that's straight and narrow, keeping your conscience clear. Clearer mind, better performance. It's the consistency of our sleep that matters the most when it comes to ongoing success in athletics and performance. But sleep is often too overlooked. When I work with athletes, what I encourage them to do is this. I want them going to bed every day at the same time and getting up at the same time. The body loves that rhythm. In fact, you have a natural circadian rhythm where you generally like to fall asleep at a certain time and like to get up at that certain time. It's not necessarily how many hours we get, but rather how consistent our sleep can be. Now, outside of the high school and the college circuit, where certainly our sleep schedules are especially thrown off, the rest of the world tends to feel great on Thursdays and Fridays. Here's why. Monday night, we tend to go to bed at a certain time, and Tuesday get up at a certain time and go to work, and same with Tuesday night and Wednesday. By Thursday, we feel great. By Friday, we're saying, thank God it's Friday. We're saying that because we've actually gone to bed the same time and got up the same time after 3-4 days. And we generally feel good. But in America, we usually stay up late Friday, sleep in Saturday, maybe stay up a little late on Saturday, and lay around watching football all day Sunday. Of course, Sunday night, we get not so good sleep, mostly because we were laying around all day and threw off that cycle. Monday morning is a tough time for many people in work. They feel sluggish, or maybe you even feel sluggish in school. Of course, Monday nights, most restaurants are closed because they just know that people aren't even going out Monday night. They just want to get home and relax and go to bed. And so it really shows us that consistency of sleep matters the most. Now, I know as a high school or college athlete, it can be very difficult to have the consistency of sleep. But if you could, that could give you a significant leg up on your competition. And you'd be amazed then at how over time, over a season, you feel better. We need the sleep because that's when our body really restores itself. It's also when our mind works itself out to be clearer. But we can't do that as well if our sleep is not consistent. Most people like to go to the ocean, to the beach for vacation. Do you ever stand along the water's edge and just feel relaxed, or maybe even falling asleep on the beach? You woke up and you didn't realize how long you'd been asleep, and maybe there's even big drool on your towel, or you got a little too sunburned. The reason is because we like to be by the water's edge in the ocean because of the ocean waves. See, the ocean waves come in and crash about 8 times per minute. What is our optimal resting respiratory rate? It's around 8 times per minute as well. You see, right now, as you're listening to this, you're probably breathing in and breathing out about 20 breaths per minute. But if you want to lower your heart rate, if you want to counterbalance anxiety and performance anxiety, we've got to bring our heart rate back down. And the only way we can slow down our heart rate is to really slow down our breathing. So take a slow, deep breath in through your nose. I encourage people to breathe in slowly for a count of 4 seconds. Pause for 1 second. Try to breathe out for 4 seconds. Pause for 1 second at the end. If you were able to do that, you'd be taking about 6 breaths per minute. And that may be a little unrealistic for some of you. But the idea is that if we can try to slow down our breathing, just like getting in sync with nature's own rhythm, the rhythm of the oceans, we feel better. It's one reason why going to the beach and going to the oceans is a multi-gazillion dollar business. We feel relaxed with nature's own rhythm. Or it's why so many parents will put ocean waves on sound machines in their little babies' rooms to help them fall asleep at night. How's your breathing? Can you slow it down? Can you bring it down a little bit lower during those bus rides or those pre-performance times when you feel like your breathing is just getting too high and your heart's beating too fast? Control your breathing to counterbalance performance anxiety. When Lou Holtz was the coach of Notre Dame football some years ago, he said that he could tell the difference between the guys that would likely be All-Americans at Notre Dame and the guys that would likely fail out. What it came down to was simply this decision. He said every day a football player would come back to his or her dorm room after practice. And in that moment, there was a decision that needed to be made. There was the desk and there was the bed. Those athletes that chose the desk and started getting their homework done right away versus those other athletes who would tend to lay down, rest a little bit, which turned into a half an hour to an hour to 2 hours, and then struggled to get back to the desk. Those athletes that chose the desk first were the guys that succeeded at Notre Dame. I know this is a very difficult decision for an athlete to make today, but I urge you, choose your desk, get your homework done first, then relax. Why? Because if you're going to get an hour to lay down today and rest, your mind will actually be more at ease lying there knowing that the work is done. And so you'll get far more out of that hour. If you were lying down with still having to do your work, you're not going to be feeling deeply relaxed. It's going to be this chronic feeling inside of you of restlessness, like, I still have to get up and get this done. So get it done first. Be, like Lou Holtz suggested, the athlete that would become an All-American because you chose the desk over the bed. It's really about emotional energy management. Forget about time management. Forget about stress management. Those are concepts of the past. If you want to have great performance, it's about emotional energy management. Emotional energy is that emotional energy that you have to meet the challenges, the stressors in front of you, how you can deal with feelings, how you can deal with the hurts inside. And so what I often encourage athletes to do is this. On a scale of 0 to 100, with 100 being the highest, and a number in the 90s is an A, numbers in the 80s is a B, 70s is a C, and 60s it's D. Anything below 60, you're in F'sville. I encourage you to rate your emotional energy right now. What number would you give yourself? How much emotional energy do you really have to meet the demands, the challenges, the realities, the stressors around you? And what I also encourage you to do is define your tipping point. At what number do you begin to unravel? At what number do you begin to break down? Many people will often say it's somewhere around 70, and that may be true. You've got to safeguard yourself against that tipping point. You've got to build in things so that if your emotional energy hits that tipping point, that you can apply these sports psychology techniques to help restore your emotional energy. When I work with athletes, I'm always encouraging them to keep their emotional energy up into the 80s and into the 90s. In fact, an athlete whose emotional energy is really high, like maybe like a 95 in a big competition, I will take them, even if they're the underdog, versus an athlete who's ranked ahead of them, but their emotional energy is probably around a 72. You see, the emotional energy is what's going to win it, because as sports progress, ultimately what happens in a competition is that you break down physically, you break down mentally, emotionally you break down, you make mistakes, or you give in. And so if you have more emotional energy, you can endure longer, you can push through harder. So I ask you, what is draining you right now at this moment of your emotional energy? What are some of the small drains, just little things? And what are some of the big things that you just feel are sucking you of that energy? Conversely, what are those things that fill you up? Who are those people that you like to be around because you kind of feel energized around them? They don't drain you, but they give you energy. Or how much rest are you really getting to restore your emotional energy? And I'm not talking about just rest on the couch watching TV. I'm talking about solitude, good, solid rest where you're away from anything that could drain you. It's very important to focus on your emotional energy. The higher it is, there's a greater correlation with athletic success. One of the things I hear coaches say to me is that the athlete is in great physical shape, phenomenal physical conditioning. However, somehow, some way, out there in the middle of a performance, they actually look tired. They look weaker, they look drained, they look a step slower. What that is that it's performance anxiety. They're emotionally drained. Physically, you might be in great shape. But if you're not emotionally, mentally prepared for the stressors of performance, it may feel as though you're sluggish, that you don't have your strength, or that your energy is not there, or that you're breathing hard. It's amazing how this rush of negative emotions can just come over a person and feel like they just opened up the drain of the tub and all the positive emotions are just being drained out. If that sounds like you, then you've really got some work to do on performance anxiety. What I suggest is we've got to build up your psychological defenses. That's your mind's ability to block out all that negative junk, all that trauma and drama that's being associated with your performance. At the same time, you've got to clear out your preconscious mind. There's some things in your mind that are negatively associated with that actual performance. For example, I can think of one athlete who would get negatively drained out there. And the truth is that privately, their father was putting a lot of pressure on that kid to perform. And that pressure from the father, the kid wanting to please the father, was actually adversely undermining the performance. Sure, the kid was in great shape, And sure, the father loved the kid very much, but that dynamic became counterproductive. This is a place where sports psychologists really can come in and help an athlete build up their psychological defenses to manage those stressors and often clear out some of the stuff in the preconscious mind that may be negatively impacting the performance. Fail forward. Fail forward. What I mean by that is you're going to make mistakes. The key is to learn from those mistakes right away and fail forward. It's been said that there is no such thing as failure, just that you didn't achieve the results that you wanted. That's a different way of cognitively reframing doing a performance or an aspect of a performance that didn't quite meet your standards. Don't say that we failed. Just say, well, I didn't achieve the results that I wanted. With a positive mindset and focusing on the small technical things that you can control, now you can fail forward. I can think of one basketball player who would take some shots early in the game and they simply wouldn't fall. They wouldn't go in. And so rather than get frustrated and feeling self-defeated, instead, he just kept his mind focused. Okay, well, that time I need to focus a little bit on squaring my hips. That time I got to jump a little higher. That time I got to pay attention to how the ball is rolling off my fingertip. That time I got to get a little bit more space. And so by focusing on the little technical things and not getting caught up in the emotion of the outcome, you can really begin to fail forward. Failing forward is a fundamental mental aspect that many successful people embody. Don't get tripped up by one of the 5 hurdles. These 5 hurdles are the things that I see athletes and leaders talk to me about again and again. These are 5 things that trip them up. These 5 hurdles are: 1, anxiety, performance anxiety in particular. 2, insomnia. They're tossing and turning in the middle of the night thinking about things instead of getting better sleep. 3, decreased home life energy. That you give your best to the world, but then privately at home, you're irritable, miserable, cranky, and moody. 4, misguided tensions. That somehow the tensions you feel inside of you get released in counterproductive ways, such as a fight, or sexual inappropriateness, or drugs and alcohol, or overeating. 5th is loneliness. That you sometimes feel that there's nobody else in the world that gets it, that understands exactly what you're going through. These 5 hurdles tend to arise when an individual's preconscious mind is flooded with stressors that are excessive, and yet they don't have the psychological skills and ability to successfully manage those stressors. This is very common for athletes because they're exposed to things that perhaps a 16-year-old wouldn't typically be exposed to, so they don't have those skills and abilities in place to deal with the monumental stressors that they're going through. And so the 5 hurdles occur because of flooded preconscious mind and ineffective skills to meet that. If you're experiencing one of the 5 hurdles, I encourage you, no, I urge you to really think about the possibility of connecting with a counselor, sports psychologist, coach, somebody to be able to talk about those stressors in your mind. The more you can successfully alleviate and resolve those stressors, the less likely you're going to experience one of these 5 hurdles. Hopefully, if you are experiencing one of these 5 hurdles, it was just a small trip and it just tripped you up, and it's not a great fall. I want you to flourish and succeed, but you got to get over these hurdles at some point. Learn the skills and abilities to do that now. Go within or go without. That's a powerful statement, and you have to ask yourself, are you going within or are you going without? Because at a certain point in athletics, if you are not working on the mental side of the game, if you are not working on what's inside of you in your mind, then you're really losing a competitive advantage. Why? Because your competitors are likely doing it. The further along you go in sports, the more people are working on the inner game. How about you? And so it is not just enough to read books on sports psychology or understand the mind through videos. Really, that's kind of taking an outside-in approach to educating yourself on the mind. I'm biased, but I really think that the inside-out approach is far better. What I mean by that is that's a conversation that you have privately with a coach or a teammate or a parent or a sports psychologist, where you are really taking the things that are deep inside of you and you are venting them, you are talking about them, you are processing them, things like your hopes, your dreams, your fears, your frustrations, your insecurities, your wishes, all of that stuff that's inside of you, as well as those hurdles that only you know about and the rest of the world has no idea, like the insecurities with a relationship, or maybe the fears of a parent or a coach, or maybe some insecurity about playing time or position, whatever it may be. Going within you and reaching in from the inside out and having the inside out process is incredibly profound, and it can transform your performance. So either you go within or you go without. If you're an injured athlete and your season is over, you've got to be very careful about one particular component that's often overlooked. And what I'm talking about is a dramatic change in your serotonin level. See, serotonin is a chemical in the brain and the body that helps us feel better. If serotonin levels are higher, we feel better. Serotonins are lower, we feel a little bit more depressed. And so as you sweat and exercise, we release our serotonin so we feel better. And particularly if you're training as an athlete, you may be used to a very high level of serotonin flowing through you every day, and you could feel great. But then suddenly, when you're injured, maybe you tear your ACL and you can no longer train at that high level. What happens over a week, 10 days, 2 weeks, or a month is that you were used to getting a certain level of serotonin every day, and gradually it drops, and now you're at a new place. I believe this is one reason why injured athletes sometimes struggle with very significant depression. Not only are they sad because the season ended or they didn't achieve the goals that they hoped for, but also their serotonin levels significantly dropped, and it's often overlooked. If this is the case for you, I encourage you to be mindful of a lot of ways to increase serotonin. Obviously, one of the most important things is to consult with your doctors and talk to them about the possibility that this might be occurring for you. Other ways to increase serotonin would be getting a sweat, whatever it might take to get some sweat, some exercise that's not going to exacerbate the injury a little bit more, but get some exercise. Being in blue skies and sunshine also can elevate your mood and help release serotonin. Being around friends and socializing with people and laughing can help release serotonin. There are all these other feel-good ways to help us get a little bit of that serotonin release that we need to pick us back closer up to that level that one was getting when they were training before the injury occurred. If you're an injured athlete, pay attention to the serotonin message, because I don't want to see you slip into that depression and be in that funk for a week or months. Begin to really pay attention, not just to the physical injury, but the emotional part of your rehab as well. If you do this, you may be surprised to find that your body heals a little bit faster, that your mood is more positive, and that you somehow rebound from this injury and get back to your previous level much sooner. You might be surprised to know that it's not the fear of failure that undermines a lot of people's performances. It's actually the fear of success. That may sound odd, but let me explain it to you. You see, it's normal and natural as human beings for us to gravitate to what's familiar to us rather than what's preferred. Oh, sure, we prefer to win the state championship. But when we do have success, success changes us. It changes the people around us. It changes our life. And therefore, we're in unfamiliar territory. What would it be like if you were a state champion? What would it be like if you were undefeated? How might that change the pressures around you? And so while we all prefer to have great success, somewhere unconsciously, we sometimes sabotage our own performance because we're familiar with always maybe being close, but never being top dog, always coming in second, but never quite beating that tough opponent. The fear of success, while a very strong unconscious component, is actually greater than the fear of failure. And so what I encourage you to do is really work on tolerating the uncomfortableness, work on change management, work on the psychological skills and abilities necessary to manage being in unfamiliar territory. If you can weather this, you can succeed. Don't be surprised in your athletic career if you see some people like a shooting star, they are just rising further than anyone ever thought possible. And you turn and say, how is he doing that? Or how is she doing that? Really? They can tolerate the uncomfortableness, the unfamiliarness that success brings. Can you do it? I think you can. Just be aware that it's normal and natural to gravitate to what's familiar rather than what's preferred, but champions can manage it. I think you can too. What is the most important night's sleep for peak performance in competition? You might be surprised to hear that it's not the night before. It's actually 2 nights before. Why? We understand that the night before any big competition, an individual is not going to have that great of quality of sleep. They're naturally anxious, a little nervous. Or maybe you're traveling, you're on the road and you're staying in a hotel where there's different sounds or feel. And so we understand that the night before, you're not necessarily going to get great sleep. Therefore, the most important night's sleep is actually 2 nights before the competition. You want to make sure you get to bed early that day and up at the same time as best you can. What is the most important night's sleep for a peak performance? It's 2 nights before, not the night before. You don't know what your opponent is thinking. So stop giving your opponent too much credit. As a sports psychologist, one of the most fascinating things to me that I see is that athletes tend to always think that their opponent is on top of their game. And that's actually far from the reality. If you are headed into a major tournament, for example, you would be surprised to know that of the people in that tournament, a handful of them are injured and their mind is distracted because of that. Another handful, they might be sick or just feeling under the weather. A couple more may be having relationship issues with their girlfriend or boyfriend. Or a few others may be just having some technical problems or some problems with their coaches or problems academically. But it's actually a bit odd that an individual would actually have it all together, that they would feel completely on top of their game with a clear mind. Don't give your opponent too much credit. Don't assume that he or she is in the right mindset. You'd be surprised to realize that that's oftentimes erroneous. That's not the case at all. And if you know this, that it's more likely that they're not going to be in the right mindset, then you could work harder to get your mind in the right place and give yourself that competitive advantage over your opponents. Don't give them credit. Get your mind in the right place. The theory of oscillation. It's a powerful theory that can have a huge impact on your performance if you adhere to it. You know, think of an oscillating fan. It just kind of moves back and forth very rhythmically. And it's true with our energy level and in our performance overall that we have this natural ebb and flow to our energy. Sometimes you have high energy and you have great practices, and sometimes there's lower energy. That we're constantly ebbing back and forth. Even within a specific day, there are moments during the day that we feel really energized and great. And there are other times we're just kind of ramping down and conserving a little bit. This is a natural rhythm to us as human beings. And if you can begin to ride this oscillation, you can understand that there are better times for you to practice and perform, and there are other times when you might need to adjust some things. And this isn't just true within the day, but it's also true within a year. Too often, athletes have their foot on the accelerator all the time. They're just training so hard, go, 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 year round. And in the end, they're burning themselves out or they're having overuse injuries. And so recognize the natural ebb and flow. When it's your season and you're in season, boy, go hard and really give it your best. But when you're out of season and there's a chance for a break, really allow yourself to ramp down. Sometimes you might not even realize how stressed you are until you actually take a real break and stop training or competing for just a little while. Then your body will begin to crash and you'll get some much needed rest. It's important to practice the theory of oscillation and knowing when to ramp up, but more importantly, when to ramp down. Want to be better? Develop your parasympathetic nervous system. What's that, you ask? Our nervous system has two branches, the sympathetic, which is our go, 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 and the parasympathetic, which is responsible for relax, relax, relax. Think of it like this. When you wake up in the morning, you're stimulating your sympathetic nervous system. And as that gets going, you feel more energized and able to get out of bed. When you go to sleep at night, you're stimulating your parasympathetic nervous system. And it's helping you to fall asleep and relax. Too often, athletes, from the time they open their eyes to the time they go to bed, they're just on go, go, go mode all day long. It's all sympathetic nervous system activity. But if you want to get a leg up on your competition, also build in developing parasympathetic activity. That part of your nervous system is so important so that you can learn to be really stimulated and on fire when you need to be and just go, but at the same time, be able to relax and turn it down. I think of a great guy named Barry Sanders. It was often legend that he would fall asleep on the sidelines of NFL games, that he would be able to ramp up and have incredible runs and ramp down. Now, developing parasympathetic nervous system to that level is a bit extreme. But whatever it might be for you, what can you do in your day to just build in times to relax or times to drift off or nod off or just close your eyes? Are you practicing meditation? Are you practicing imagery? Are you doing some yoga? Are you getting proper rest? Anything like that can go a long way at allowing your body to more easily activate the parasympathetic nervous system when it's needed. Don't be one of these people that say they go, go, go all the time and they have a very difficult time falling asleep, in part because they just haven't developed the parasympathetic nervous system in a way that allows it to just kick in and turn on when it needs to. Practice and develop your parasympathetic nervous system. When you've got both sides of the coin going, when you've got both sides of the nervous system going, you're more in balance and you'll be able to ramp it up when you need to and shut it down when you need to as well. There's incredible wisdom all around you. And you're so fortunate as an athlete that people are encouraging you and sharing great words with you. But are you capturing it in a way that you can utilize it, not just in that moment, but for a lifetime? One of the greatest lessons I learned from a high school coach was to actually start a quote book. Do you have one? I'm just talking about a little spiral notebook or maybe something on your computer, but something, some place where you're actually writing down the words of wisdom that people are speaking to you. You may not realize this, but it's not going to be like this forever, where people are intentionally pouring into you and saying great things that help develop your mind. If you don't capture this stuff by writing it down somewhere or typing it down somewhere, then years from now, this might be lost. When I heeded my coach's advice and I started a little quote book, you would be amazed at how many of my friends eventually would come up to me and say, "Hey, do you have that little book? Can I borrow? I just need some encouragement." Man, I would write things down that I would see in the newspaper or hear on TV or read from a book. You know, a lot of times we read lots of different books, but unfortunately, we don't actually capture the nuggets of information from that book into something where we can utilize it long term. That's what this notebook is for. Consider it mental skills notebook or your sports psychology notebook, whatever it may be, it's your place where the great wisdom that's around you, that you're absorbing from coaches, from camps, from clinics, from books, from movies, from TV, is all coming together so that when you need it the most, maybe again you're traveling on the bus or maybe you're staying in a hotel and privately you just need a little encouragement, this is your resource. Make sure you get a quote book. The one thing that student athletes, or more specifically even scholar athletes, tend to give up in order to have the success that they want to have in both the classroom and on the field is very simply this: their social life. If you talk to athletes at the higher levels, you'll find that they don't have enough time, enough room in their schedule to go out and hang out with their friends. Be prepared for this. Because if you want to excel in sports, it's going to chew up a lot of your time academically and athletically. Something's got to give. It's going to be, for most people, the social life. Now, I want to encourage you that this may sound like drudgery, but it's really not. And so there's a lot of stuff that goes on with social lives during high school, college, and in your 20s that you really can go without. It's not the end of the world. You just make that time that you do go out more meaningful and have deeper relationships. But you can't have both. You can't be the athlete that's running out, having this wild social life, and also doing well academically and athletically. It's very, very, very difficult to do. Something's got to give if you're going to have success in athletics. And typically, if you're going to be a scholar athlete, it's going to be your social life. So understand that. Begin to mourn that loss and to be more intentional about that limited time you have to socialize. According to some research, the number one factor in success of an athlete is actually support. How well developed their support system is. I mean, think about it. The athletes that tend to play in high school are the athletes that tend to have parents or a support person actually take them to practice, pick them up from practice, and show up at the games. The more support an individual has for their sport, the more likely they're going to stick with it, the more likely they're going to get a bunch of reinforcing factors, and the more success they're going to have. So the question is, how is your support system? Who are some of the primary people that are really interested in what you're doing in your sport? And how can you grow your support system? What are some things that you might be able to do to bring more people on board? You might be surprised to find out that just inviting classmates or an aunt or an uncle to a game and letting them know how much it would mean to you to have them there, how they will very likely respond and follow and support you. You can build out your support system by just taking a little time and a little energy to thank them, to invite them. If you can grow your support system, it's more likely that you're going to go further in sports and have more success along the way. Come on, suck it up. Don't whine, don't complain, don't be a baby. Have you heard those messages? Sure, we all have heard those messages in the sports world, and there is a time and a place where those messages work really well. But what I'm suggesting is that you've had to have another tool in your toolbox to deal with the emotional stressors that you're going through as an athlete. So perhaps away from the field, privately, that's a really good opportunity to talk about your stressors. That's right. I'm asking you to talk about those stressors, not to suck it up, not to repress it, not to avoid it. Because we know that the more you just block that stuff out, it just floods your preconscious mind and it's going to undermine your performance down the road. And so I'm encouraging you to talk about those feelings, talk about those stressors. If you can talk with that person directly, for example, the coach that maybe you have a conflict with, that would be best. If you can talk with the teammate, perhaps that there's some tension with, that would be wonderful. If not, at least talking with your mom or your dad. And then, of course, I'm biased, but privately talking with a sports psychologist or a counselor can be another avenue to help you release that tension that you might be holding inside. Suck it up and deal with it? Yeah, that works, but only so far. I encourage you to talk about it. The biopsychosocial spiritual model of mental health and well-being is a fundamental component that you need to understand in order to have success in sports. I want you to think of a 3-leaf clover with a stem. Imagine that one leaf is biological. One leaf has on it written psychological. One leaf written on it is social. And the stem is spiritual. If you want to have great mental health and well-being, all of these components are vital. For example, the biological, we know that the apple never falls too far from the tree. If there's depression, anxiety, substance abuse, things like this in your family, then you might have a biological predisposition for some of this. We often know that biochemically, we know that serotonin, norepinephrine, dopamine affect our moods. And so exercise tends to help us release serotonin and improve our moods. And so the more you work out, the more you exercise, the better you often feel. Pay attention to these biological components of your mental health and well-being. Psychologically, this is what you're thinking, feeling, and doing. What you're thinking, feeling, and doing. And so in sports psychology, a lot of focus is on changing those thoughts or paying attention to the feelings or altering some behaviors, what you're actually doing. Socially, this is who you're hanging around with. That's your home life, your school life, your work life, your friends. And so it's very important. If you're not having the results that you want, then you might want to look at the people around you and change your environment. When you're hanging around very successful people, very inspiring people, it's amazing how those tendencies rub off on you. And lastly, the stem is spiritual. The stem is what holds it all up. And for some people, this can be an incredible source of strength in their life. And for some people, it's just not something that they're paying attention to. The most successful people that I've seen are really actively cultivating a healthy biological component, psychological component, social component, and a real strong spiritual life. We often say that the stem, being spiritual, is what keeps the clover in the ground and able to get the water and thrive. But if you pluck out the stem, if you pluck out a clover from the ground, eventually it will wither and die. And so you want to be connected with your source, and that's more of a spiritual component. Practice all 4 of these, and you'll have overall better mental health and well-being, and that will translate into more success in sports and beyond. Toxicity. That's an interesting word. Toxicity is what you want to avoid in the sports world. And what I mean by that is that there are some people in your world that are essentially toxic, that they are radiating a negative energy, or that they are in your life and sucking you of your emotional energy. That somehow when you're around them, you don't feel bigger, you don't feel better, you actually feel less than. You feel like you regress a bit. And so you want to be very careful about being around other people that are toxic. They might not even know that they're having that impact on you. And it may not even be your place to tell them about that impact on you. But it is within your right to create the space necessary between you and them, to minimize your interaction with them, to limit the ability they have of speaking that negativity into your life. Build up your defenses when you are around them so that whatever they are trying to send your way, you're not receiving. And create ways to kind of get out of that situation so you don't feel your energy zapped. Now, this may be more complicated or harder than it seems, but it's important that you at least identify those individuals around you. Maybe they're on your team, maybe they're in your home, maybe they're in your class, and to try to just minimize the interaction time you have with them. This becomes important because it will enable you to have greater emotional energy and to surround yourself more with positive people that are going to fill you up and take you in the direction that you really want to go. As a parent, I often ask you, what do you talk with your son or daughter about? Too often the answer is, well, I talk about sports and I talk about grades. But I say, okay, outside of that, what else do you talk to your son or daughter about? And again, too often the response is, well, there's not much we do talk about. I challenge you right now, give a percentage to the amount of time that your dialogue back and forth between your son or daughter that's an athlete is focused on performance, meaning athletics or academics. Is it about 80% of your conversation, 90%, 95%? Because if the higher that number gets, the more problematic it is. Here's why. The further an athlete goes in sports, the more everybody in the world wants to talk to them about that particular sport. And it can add more pressure. What they really want, the further they go, is to talk about anything else but that sport. And as a parent, you've got to have some kind of connection back and forth between your child and you so that if the sport ever ended tragically tomorrow, there would be something else that you guys have in common. Too often, parents don't have that other thing in common. If that's you, I encourage you to think right now about what you might be able to begin to talk with your son or daughter about that has nothing to do with performance, nothing to do with sports, nothing to do with grades. Maybe it's something about funny movies that you like that are coming out, or maybe it's about an artist or music, or maybe it's museums that you like to go to, or trips that you want to take. Whatever it may be, find something. I know one parent who watched a TV show with his daughter every week, and that half hour meant so much to him because that was guaranteed time that they would have and something they could talk about. What do you talk to your son or daughter about? What percentage of the time do you talk about sports? And what else can you build in to talk with them about? You're missing something on your iPod. And you need to have this if you're going to have greater performance. Here's what it is. Do you have relaxation music on your iPod? Do you listen to some soft, relaxing music on the bus ride to your competition? Too often what I hear from athletes is the answer is no. In fact, what they tend to have is music that gets them fired up. That's a problem because they're getting too fired up too soon. The game might be at 7 o'clock, but at 4 o'clock, they're listening to music that's getting their heart rate pounding. Sure, they feel amped up, but in the middle of the game, they're running out of gas. Here's what I suggest. Putting relaxing piano music or music that doesn't have any words in the song. That drives your brainwave state to what we call more of an alpha realm. Let me explain. There are 4 main brainwave states: beta, alpha, theta, and delta. Beta is your brainwave state, meaning your electrical activity in your brain, which is very high. Right now, you're probably in beta brainwave state as you listen to this. Alpha is more relaxed. It's kind of like when you're lying on the couch watching TV. Theta is when you're falling asleep, you're kind of in and you're kind of out. Maybe you're watching a movie and you sort of kind of remember part of it. And then delta is sound asleep. And so we want to ramp down prior to a competition and conserve emotional energy. And music pushes your brain wave into those states. So instead of listening to music that gets your brain wave up into beta, try listening to relaxing piano music that would push your brain wave down to an alpha state, maybe even a theta state. And so if you can do this, you're actually going to help counterbalance the natural anxiety, the performance anxiety that many athletes feel in the few hours prior to their competition. Who are some people that I suggest? I'm a big fan of Danny Wright. He's a pianist and he is fantastic. And so, or it might just be some other musicians that play relaxing music, but no words. You don't want to have the words because they can impact your thinking. You know, the relaxing music without words allows your mind to drift, allows your brainwave to drop, and you slip into alpha brainwave state. What's on your iPod? What are your hobbies? What do you like to do for fun? Truly. Do you have them? Can you think of them? Because a sad reality that I sometimes see in sports is that sports become all-encompassing. And that what happens with an athlete is that they just focus on their grades or they focus on their training, but then there's no real outlet, no real opportunity for them to just do something for fun. And so it becomes very important for you to have a hobby, something that has nothing to do with performance, nothing to do with your sport. Because the further you go in your sport, the more people are going to talk to you about that again and again and again. And in fact, what I sometimes hear from athletes is that that can become a bit annoying, that they want to talk about anything else but their sport, and that they want to have some release that's totally different, unrelated. I think of one athlete that I know of. He was so successful in his particular sport, but what he became really known for was his use of magic. He loved to do magic. It was his hobby to do magic tricks, particularly card tricks. And so people would often come up and talk to him. Even opposing teams and opponents would come up and say to him, hey, can you show me some of those tricks? It was a nice, fun hobby that had nothing to do with his particular sport. In the end, he had incredible success in sports and in life because he didn't just put all of his eggs in one basket. He had the opportunity to build out a hobby and just have some fun. What are your hobbies? What are 2 or 3 things that you truly like to do that have nothing to do with your sport, and you do it for the pure enjoyment? If you don't have them now, the further you go in sports, the more you're going to need them. I suggest you get some hobbies. Are your goals written down? Do you have them somewhere? Too often when I work with athletes, what I hear from them is that they do not have their goals written down for the season. This is a huge concern to me because when we get those things out of our mind and actually put it tangibly on a piece of paper, the goal is not just something we think about, but it becomes a bit of a reality. And particularly if your goals are written down and you share that with your coach or your team, I always encourage athletes and coaches to talk about their goals. In fact, on my website, mindoftheathlete.com, there's a free goals handout there for you to download. And it's not just like 1 or 2 goals. It's about 30 goals. I'm talking about academic goals and goals on offense and defense and goals with teammates and social and performance on the field and off the field. We're talking about having lots of goals written down because the more specific those goals are, the more attainable those goals are, the more achievable those goals are, the better off you're going to be. And so write down your goals. Share them with a coach at the beginning of a season, review them mid-season, and then change them if needed along the way. And as you end the season, really process, how did I do in achieving these goals? It's amazing, and the studies are very clear. If you're writing down your goals, you're going to have better performance. Thanks so much for listening to the Mind of the Athlete Mental Endurance CD program. I applaud you for developing the mental side of your game. If you want more information, check out our website at www.mindoftheathlete.com.